This video is part of a 6-part video series on creating a landing page from scratch. So in case you haven't already, be sure to check out the other parts of the series as well. Thanks a lot for tuning in. I hope you will enjoy the following video.
Okay, so I was adjusting the icon color of the Twitter icon back to orange again because I think really the readability wasn't good enough. So I had to accept some sacrifices here in terms of consistency, but I'm still overall quite happy with the result. I also added the wave texture from one of the sections above here in the background as well. And the last thing we're going to take a look at now is basically the newsletter and footer section. For these two sections, I think it would be a good idea to have a lot of contrast because they are the end of the website and I would like to indicate that in a prominent way. And that's why I will create a rectangle now with the dark primary color. And I can duplicate this headline again. And I will adjust it again and we'll name it Sign Up for Our Newsletter. And since the newsletter section is not really a major, very prominent section, I think using the headline 2 is a bit too prominent, and instead I will probably use the headline we introduced before with this italic font weight. So that's 34 pixels and italic. Oh, and I think that works quite well. And I also want to add a sub-headline. Which I will align directly after the headline. And in terms of hierarchy, I think 16 pixels are still enough. Afterwards, I will again press R and create a rectangle because this will be the input field for the users that want to sign up. So I'm duplicating the text. Here I change the text color to the blue tone. And I will just add here random mail, johndoe@mail.com. And I decrease the opacity from 100% to 40 or 50%, maybe even a bit lighter. I think 40% is a good compromise. Then I will copy one of these primary buttons and I will paste them here. And I will rename this button to Sign Up. And now I will adjust some of the spacings here. And we already have our newsletter section, which we can still align now in this blue element. Like I said before, I just have some random numbers in my mind, for example, 20 pixels for the smaller distances, 60 pixels for the bigger ones, and then 120 for the major paddings on top and on the bottom. If we want to keep it minimalistic, which makes a lot of sense for this brand, I think we could already leave it here and continue with the footer. For this I basically do the same thing. I duplicate the rectangle from above by pressing Command C and Command V, and I will move it some pixels downwards to have this white line that differentiates the footer section from the sign up newsletter section. And the first thing I will do here is I will duplicate this element and call it Enkida. So this should basically represent the logo. Since this is a very fast and quick demo project that didn't come up with a logo typography, we will basically use this as a replacement now for the logo. We can put the sitemap here, for example. And for this we could use a bigger font size, for example the one we used for the subheadlines, which is 24 pixels. And for the actual sitemap links, we could then use the paragraph size. I can also increase the line height here a bit. Yeah, and I think that looks actually quite decent. I'm going to take a look at my wireframe again. Another thing that I noted down is that we can add a company description here. So despite the sitemap, we can add a company description. For this purpose, I will copy this description text from before. And we can also decrease the opacity a bit because it's not really clickable, and we want to have some differentiation between the links, the actual clickable links, and the company description. Another thing I noted down is social media links and also imprint policies and so forth. So I'm trying to adjust the things I created to the grid here, and I'm adding a horizontal line to divide the main content of the footer and add the imprint and the policy underneath it here. So here could be imprint, and what else did we say? The privacy policy. We could add that here on the right side, and on the left side it's common to add the copyright here. And we can also use a smaller font size for these elements and decrease the opacity a bit so that it matches the company description, for example. I will still think about some exemplary links for the sitemap, and we'll maybe add some more social media links, and then we will round up the whole thing with the navigation, and then we're basically done with this project, I would say. Okay, so I added some final touches to the footer and also to the sign up section. I decreased the font size of the sitemap, added additional elements like services and social media, and made the description also a bit more subtle so that it has some more luxury appeal to it. And I also decreased the size of the newsletter sign up section so that we can make this as compact as possible and that the user can actually have a good overview of the site structure here in the footer. The last thing that we can add here now is basically the navigation. And to add this navigation, I will increase the size here on top a little bit, and I will start off with a 16 pixel font, and I will call this Home Now. Another section could be About Us, then Destinations, Values, and so on. I will add more specific content here later on, and then we can adjust the horizontal spacing between those elements here. We can try to align them with the grid here, for example. If we group them, we can also use a feature from Figma, which is very useful if you have a lot of elements with the same distance between each other. You can just use this scroll element here and adjust the spacing between each element. Another thing I would like to add here is the logo, and we will copy that logo from the footer. This one here. And I can place it here, adjust the font color accordingly. And what also makes sense at this point is to have a vertical divider between the logo and the navigation points. Maybe something subtle like this. And I also want to align the logo with the baseline of my text. And then align it to the layout grid. Another thing that we can do is we can highlight the home element because it's currently active by increasing the font weight to medium. And we could also add a very subtle line to indicate that it's currently active, like this, and also change the text color accordingly. We could add some interactions on the right side. One possible call to action would be, for example, a sign up. So I will just copy one of the existing buttons, and we can add another link which is probably not that important, so we won't use a button but we will use a text instead to have some differentiation in terms of importance here. That could be login. And if we're talking about a travel agency for international clients, we could also add a language switch here. We could add a vertical ruler here, a divider, to divide the login and the sign up link from the language switch. And for the language switch, we can go back to a light font weight, and we could add a circular element here again. In this circular element, we could add either a visual indicating the possibility to change the language, so some sort of language icon, or we could also add a specific country flag here. And I'm also trying to design this in a similar way to the elements we used in the slider element. I will then later on look for an existing English or Great Britain, England flag that we could use here. Another thing that we could use here is a arrow icon. So we can use and copy the ones from the slider, paste it here and adjust the font color accordingly. Then turn it around, and then we can scale it by pressing K again and by just making it a bit smaller so that it fits the size of the typography, and also changing its stroke that is attached to the element. Great, so now we also came up with an interesting navigation, and I will add the flag as I mentioned already, do some more minor changes, and I think then we can summarize everything, talk about some general things that I usually do when finalizing a design, like cleaning up the layer structure, taking a look at the different spacings and at the different fonts being used, and then we're basically done. Alright, so I finished the navigation now, and there are now two last things that I would highly recommend you to do once you're finished with your rough design draft. The very first thing that I did now was I created some elements with different spacings, and I basically went through the whole design with these elements. So it's actually quite straightforward. It's just a rectangle with a specific height, here for example 80 pixels, and a color that is very easy to recognize. Then I just went through the design and took a look at the different spacing and said, okay, did I really use 80 pixels here? Alright, I did. Did I really use 120 pixels here? Did I really use 40 pixels here? So this way I went through the whole design and made sure that all of the spacings that I used are really cohesive and do have a certain type of structure to it. It's actually very similar to using a horizontal grid, but in a vertical way. It just ensures that the whole layout feels similar, has the same style to it, and looks cohesive and structured. So I can highly recommend to walk through the design again and take a look at the different spacings and adjust them accordingly, because in the beginning of the design you're more in the phase of iterating and trying things out. So you might not want to invest too much time into being very specific with the spacings, being very strict. You want to just ideate without thinking about the whole structure too much. But then when you go into the finalized design, you want to make sure that all of the things you might not thought about initially are now done in a proper way. Besides adjusting the spacing, I also made a typography cheat guide. You could also call it a very minimal style guide, so to say, where I added the most important colors that I used in the design and the different font sizes and font weights. And there's a really useful feature in Figma that you can use. If you click on a specific type, you can go to the right sidebar, and here is an icon called Style. And here I can create different text styles. For example, I could name this one Headline 1, and I can go on to the next type, and I call this Headline 2, Headline 3. This would be a paragraph prominent, and this would probably be a default paragraph. This would be the button text, for example. And now I have all of the different headline sizes in my Figma project, and I can just walk through the project and assign a specific style to the different texts. And this way I can ensure that I didn't use 10, 15 different font sizes, different font families, but instead I defined specific font sizes and a specific font family in the very beginning of the project. And I tried to keep all of these cohesive. In general, I would really recommend to not use too many font styles. Use a maximum of 2 font families, especially in web design or on digital purposes. For editorial purposes, one might be able to use more than 2 font families, but I would really recommend for digital projects to not go too crazy with it and stick to 2 font families, and also only use font sizes with a really extinct differentiation between each other. So do not use a font size of 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, but instead you could use 16, 24, 35, 50, 70, make bigger jumps, increase the hierarchy, so the whole layout will be much more readable, it will be more interesting and more appealing to the user. Yeah, with these 2 tips, adjusting the vertical and the horizontal spacing in your design, and also walking through the design to ensure you didn't use too much different font sizes and font families, these 2 things are key to a cohesive, finalized design, I would say. We already reached the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed creating it. This was the very first video where I really went from the very first briefing to the wireframe and then to the final design through a complete process of creating a landing page. I am of course aware that you could increase the level of detail a lot and that I skipped a lot of process steps along the way because it would have taken too much time to record all of this. And I'm also aware that maybe I was too fast at some points and that I could have maybe talked about specific things more in detail. I'm still in the beginning of creating videos like this, so if you have any feedback on how to improve my videos, feel free to let me know and I will try to incorporate that feedback in my videos. I would say thanks a lot for watching and we'll see each other soon again. Bye.
This video is part of a 6-part video series on creating a landing page from scratch. So in case you haven't already, be sure to check out the other parts of the series as well. Thanks a lot for watching this video.